Hi, I'm Gillian Konko. I'm one of the hosts of the Play on Owds podcast, and this week we are talking to some of the people involved in Love Song Productions' She Felt Fear. This is an incredible piece of new writing, written and directed by Kirsty Miles. And in this production, there's an integration of poetry, original music, live music, and some incredible script. So this production was actually written to include a cellist and some cello music, but they actually have now had to adapt, and they're now using a violinist. So that's been an interesting process. Also, Adam Possener has created original music. You'll hear that later on in this episode. It's a crazy, crazy cool show. I'm so excited for you to hear about it. So just stay tuned. You'll get to hear a little bit about the rehearsals, some behind the scenes information, and all in all, just a really fascinating production. So hi to you both. Thank you so much for agreeing to interview with us. Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourselves to the podcast?
Hi, yeah, thanks for having us. I'm Kirsty, and I'm writing and directing She Felt Fear.
And I'm Juliette. I'm playing Catherine.
Thank you so much. So right now we're in their rehearsal space. It's early in the rehearsal process. So Kirsty, why don't you just go ahead and tell us a little bit about She Felt Fear? From what I can tell, it's centered about relationships and love, and there's themes of intimacy, connection, ambition. Where did this idea first come from?
Yeah, well, it's about university students, which I thought would be nice for, university students to go and see and connect to. And it's kind of a combination of lots of my individual interests. So we've got live music composed by Adam that is going to be performed on the stage. We've also got character Peter, who writes poetry, character Lily, who sings a song that she's written. So we're kind of interested in lots of different forms of creativity, and then also themes of youth and growing up and relationship and friendship issues. So yeah, we tackle a lot.
Yeah, that sounds pretty action-packed,
Yeah.
All packed in there. So Juliette, you're, as a cast member, when you saw the audition call out with all that going on, what was your first response to the play?
Definitely I was attracted to the fact that it was written by a student. It was a completely new play, and the side of it that's very poetic, very artistic. There's moments in the play where Catherine or the narrator start to talk in a very, I forgot the word now, non-literal.
Figurative?
Yes, thank you. In a very figurative way, which I thought was very interesting. And I was also drawn to the character of Catherine in particular because of how it explores issues of mental health and perfectionism, and how Catherine during the play realizes that she sort of needs to reevaluate the value that she puts into friendships and relationships, that they can bring her more than she thinks.
I know.
What? What are you laughing
No, I
at?
can't. It's too mean to say.
Say it.
You don't have enough friends for things to be complicated. It's true. You're smiling. So what are we going to do about that? You can't have only me as a friend.
Well,
I know. I'm such a good friend that I'm worth 5. But Kathy, think about it. If a trashy TV sitcom were based on your life, it would be so boring. It would be the kind of TV show that dads up and down the country lie down and fall asleep in front of. So, have you made any new friends this year? It's your last chance,
Kirsty, as a student director, a student writer, a lot of people in those roles find it difficult to kind of go through an audition process, the kind of power balance in the room. So do you have any advice for other people about how that worked? Can you speak a little bit about how that worked for you?
Yeah. Well, I think my aim is, I think we're all students, we're all the same age, we're all friends. We're attempting to we're friends first and just create a comfortable atmosphere with everyone. And everyone can come up with ideas. It's not just a director telling people what to do, but actors come up with ideas, people in the crew, everyone's ideas are valuable. So yeah, I think making it collaborative project is important, so there's no like power imbalances there. And yeah, no idea is better than any other. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And part of that crazy idea mix, I think, is, if I'm correct, there's a cellist who's going to be playing music live on stage with new music written for this production, as well as some classical pieces like Song of the Birds. Why was that musical element so important to you for the show?
Well, it was inspired by one production, actually. I think I saw of Macbeth where they had musicians on stage, and I think it's a really lovely thing to have the musicians on stage, because then you actually see that like act of like creating the music on stage, and it becomes like a dramatic thing that you're witnessing as well. And I think in a play that we're like, in which we're so interested in like people writing songs or writing poetry, that like we see that act of creation of the music is also like important to us, and also really kind of like dramatic as well, like just seeing a musician on stage, like their gestures of bowing or whatever is still like captivating. Yeah.
I'm getting more and more interested. So by the end of this, everybody is going to be coming to see the show. So the characters in the show, I believe, listen to the Song of the Birds in its entirety. So what was it about that piece that made you want to feature it so prominently?
That's a good question, actually. I feel like it's departed a lot from where it started. It kind of started with a friend of mine had actually written a poem about the Song of the Birds. So there's one performance of it where the cellist, at the beginning, he like says something. It's like his last performance, I think, ever playing the cello. And he just talks about the piece, and he talks about how I think it's something about like the birds. He imagines the birds in the songs chanting like peace, peace, peace or something. And I just found that really compelling, because the way he was saying it was kind of like it felt like a dramatic monologue that he was saying, and turning this whole performance into this kind of dramatic situation. So yeah, I mean, it's completely departed from like what he was talking about now, but I think that's what I was interested in, that like the playing of the music could become something interesting to watch and dramatic in itself.
So Juliette, for you as an actor, having music as a dramatic presence, as almost another actor on stage, how has that affected the way that you play your character, you approach the role?
Well, that's a really good question. It's hard to answer at the moment because in rehearsals we haven't actually had the cello.
Oh, okay. So you'll have to come to the show to figure that out, guys.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, we just did a rehearsal where Lily and Catherine are supposed to be dancing to this pop song, but actually the song that's playing on stage is Song of the Birds, which is classical and quite melancholic. And so Lily and Catherine, or the actors, have to imagine that Song of the Birds to them is like a pop song. And I think it just highlighted to me that we are in a different world that is a figment of Kirsty's imagination. and so it is, I think it really helps you get into character in that sense.
Okay. So guys, come to the show for a look inside Kirsty's brain, apparently, is what I'm hearing. So alongside music, poetry is also really heavily featured in the show. So what was it like writing in all these different styles? Has poetry been an influence on the script in general, or?
That's a good question. I think writing poetry is something that comes a bit more naturally to me, or like a lot of the poetry that I use in this are like fragments of bits and pieces that I've written over the years, not even with a view to creating them, like making a play out of them. So yeah, I've used a lot of like a back catalogue of things that I've written, and then writing the like actual dramatic exchanges has been like a completely different challenge, and it is a big challenge because it's like suddenly in poetry it's like very my voice or my feelings, and then in drama you've got to think about two different voices, two different people. You've got to become like different people, so that I find that trickier, but interesting and fun to do still.
Very cool, very cool. And then again, you as an actor, you're one of those people who has to embody that poetry and perform it. Do you find it different than performing prose or other kind of typical kinds of drama, or how does it feel for you?
Yeah, it's definitely different and very new to me. Also because you have to approach the poetry from the perspective of the character, I think, because the character is, themselves are discovering the poetry. And I think it's about trying to think, what's the character getting out of this poem, and what does it mean to the character, rather than what does it mean to me as an actor.
So we've talked a lot about the kind of writing and build up of this play, but I just want to re-emphasize that you wrote this play and you're directing it, which is a huge feat. So what have you learned about playwriting in this process, and do you think it's affecting the way that you direct, that you wrote it?
Interesting. Well, I think sometimes it feels easier to make that decision of directing your own thing, because when you're writing it you have that vision in your head, so it kind of feels like if I gave this to someone else, would they understand what I was trying to capture?
But Kirsty is always, she knows what she wants in rehearsals. But in a good way, she'll take our input, of course, but it's also nice having, knowing that you have that vision.
That's good. I'm glad you think that. But yeah, no, it is interesting because it's like when you're writing it on a page, it's so different to what it's going to be like in person. So there is still an editing process once you've directed it and you hear it out loud and you're like, oh, actually, maybe that doesn't work, which is fine. It doesn't mean that the writing is wrong. It's just a hard thing to capture, hard to imagine it actually coming out of people's mouths and these specific actors' mouths too. Yeah.
So on that note, do you have any advice? I know a lot of the kind of people around ALDS, writing is an idea they want to do, they're a little bit scared of. It's a very daunting process. Do you have any advice for kind of aspiring writers?
I think just doing it. Yeah, I was actually initially I came into this academic year thinking more long term, maybe in third term I'll have written something by then and I'll put it on. But actually as the year was progressing, I was just and seeing everyone putting on these shows, it was actually I just need to do it and get it done. And having that mindset of I'm doing this for me and for me to become a better writer and director, and it doesn't really, if things slightly go wrong, it's okay. We're all in a learning process, and we're all doing it in this space where we're just trying to learn for ourselves. So yeah, just give yourself that opportunity and go for it.
Right. So if this hasn't been convincing enough, would you like to give one sentence about why our listeners should come and see She Felt Fear?
I don't know if I can do it in one sentence, but I think I don't know. When I've gone to see
take as long as you want.
Don't worry. I think when I've gone to see student plays last term, I was I was just so impressed whenever something was just like really ambitious or like trying to push something. And for me, that was like all the play needed to do, because like we're all so busy with our degrees or whatever, and so it's hard to make something perfect. But if it's being ambitious and trying to do something different, like that's amazing. And I think that we're doing that with this play. So if you want to see something that is like ambitious and trying to push boundaries or creativity, then come see it.
That convinced me.
Yeah. No pressure on me now. I'd say it's because of how raw and genuine the relationships are in the play. There's just 2 relationships, Peter and Catherine, and Lily and Catherine, but they're so well developed. And I think they're just really relatable for any university student. And it's a very sort of kind and caring look at how those relationships develop, and how they reflect relationships in real life.
Okay, well, that was fantastic. Thank you both so much. And thank you so much for being on the podcast. See you later.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Ouds podcast, hosted by Gillian Konko. Our editors are Hannah Gallardo-Parsons. The podcast is produced by Charlotte Baxendale, Noah Wild, and Lizzie Carr. If you enjoyed the podcast, please do get in touch at oudspodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at Ouds Podcast. And don't forget to subscribe.